Greetings. I am so honored to be a part of this celebration, 250th birth anniversary of the master Ludwig van Beethoven. My parents put the violin in my hands when I was 7 years of age, and growing up as a classical violinist, a musical artist, of course I played the music of Mozart and Tchaikovsky, Brahms, but the music of Beethoven always had a special place in my heart. And it wasn't until I had gone to college at the University of Rochester Eastman School of Music. One night I was in the library and I was watching a VHS video lecture of the man who would become my teacher and mentor, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he was speaking, and in his speech he was commenting on the tremendous contributions that Black people have made that we may not know about. And in this part of the speech he said, like Jesus, and he said, like Beethoven. And when he said like Beethoven, it was like the lights had come on in the room. I had to stop the tape, rewind it back, and play it again. And I said to myself, did he say Beethoven? And in that moment, he opened the door for me. I went into the library, the Rush Reese Library at the University of Rochester campus, Sibley Music Library at Eastman, and I began to dig into books and research. And I found that the man Beethoven, whose music I had always loved, was a man who looked like me. And for young Black children growing up in classical music, in my experience, we may not ever see someone looking like us playing and performing on instruments like the violin and in classical music, let alone the greatest composer of all time being one from among us. Later on, I would be with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan when he would perform the Beethoven Violin Concerto in Los Angeles in 2002 with the Symphony of the New World. And when he began to mentor me on this piece, the tremendous power of the Beethoven Violin Concerto and what Beethoven put in his concerto, the minister said to me, using the example of the life of Beethoven and his challenges, to let the adversity in your life serve your creativity. And it was Beethoven's tremendous challenge in losing his hearing that gave birth to the tremendous creativity in the music that we admire today. So here is a man who is a musical genius, an artist, performer, but to lose the one handicap that should be most profound in someone of his caliber, to have that become the handicap that would almost end his career, I can only imagine what that must feel like. But it was when Beethoven went to Heiligenstadt to essentially take his own life, that it was there that God intervened in his affairs. And rather than take his own life, it was there in his darkest moment that God anointed him with the power to write music in deafness. And in fact, the music that Beethoven wrote after coming out of Heiligenstadt was the most profound music that we had ever heard up to that point in classical music. He was writing music that had notes on the piano. They had to expand the notes on the keyboard to accommodate the music that he was writing. In his symphonies, he was writing music for instruments that they had to expand the size and the instrumentation of the orchestra to accommodate music that he never heard as we hear, but in his heart and in his mind, God had given him innovation. And even his Beethoven Violin Concerto, when it was premiered in 1806, was deemed so technically challenging, it was called unplayable, that no one touched it for 50 years after its premiere. A man that had never heard what he wrote, but yet here we are today, still admiring and appreciating his contribution. And so I believe that Beethoven has achieved what we say in the spiritual realm as eternal life. Here it is 250 years from his birth, and we're still talking about Beethoven. Beethoven is still alive. His physical flesh is not present, but in the sheet music, in the notes, is a man who put his heart and his mind, and it's our responsibility as artists to take the notes and take the spirit of Beethoven and have that spirit transcend through our instruments to bring him to life, and we continually bring him to life as we are doing in this celebration. And so I'm honored to be here, to be a part of bringing Beethoven and keeping him alive and having him live through me and through the students that I teach through Muhammad School of Music, that the name of Beethoven and his contribution may live on forever. One of the pieces that I'm presenting in the Beethoven Sonata No. 9 was written for another black classical superstar of his day, a man that was referred to as the Abyssinian Prince, George Polgreen Bridgetower, who was a violin virtuoso, and he and Beethoven came together to write this sonata. And when I perform the sonata with my piano accompanist, Mr. Tony Kunz, I can feel in the sonata the conflict that black classical artists experienced at that day, and that I experience today. I can hear the back and forth between the piano and the violin, and the conversation that these two men had, these two brothers had, and their experience that they wrote into the music. And now here we are today. I can play the music and hear and feel what that must have been like, and also what I am experiencing myself. It's a marvelous piece, and as the story goes, Beethoven hadn't even finished writing the piece up until the premiere, so much so that Bridgetower had to stand over Beethoven's shoulder at the piano and read the violin solo. And then the story continues on that later that night, they were at dinner, and Bridgetower, in a conversation, said something disparaging about Beethoven's immortal beloved. And Beethoven went home and scratched the dedication off of Bridgetower and wrote in Rudolf Kreutzer's name, and Kreutzer hadn't even played the piece. But what would have been of Bridgetower's career had we had kept the dedication under his name? We would know more of him than we do today. And the second piece that we're offering from Muhammad School of Music is an excerpt from our 2015 performance of National Opera Week, where we presented the Beethoven Violin Concerto in its entirety. And for the finale, the students of Muhammad School of Music performed an excerpt from Beethoven's Ode to Joy, the culminating work of his artistry, the piece that represents Beethoven's call for universal brotherhood, a piece that was so monumental at the time that when Beethoven passed several years later, they say that over 20,000 people came to his funeral service. The Ode to Joy is a legendary, timeless work that, again, as we are celebrating now 250 years later, Beethoven remains alive. His message of hope and peace and universal brotherhood remains alive. And this time, the time of George Floyd, the time of the conflict in politics and religion and divisiveness all over the world, Beethoven's music represents the sign of what can be accomplished when we come together. So when I play the Beethoven Violin Concerto or conduct the Ode to Joy, in front of the orchestra, we have all of these instruments. We have the violins, and we have the cellos and the flutes and the oboes and the brass and the percussion. And as Beethoven was able to go into his heart and his mind in the silence of deafness, but yet hear what God put in him, he was able to put on the score, on the staff, and put the violins with the cellos and the flute, and then the voices of the Ninth Symphony, and the solo voice, the tenor and the baritone and the soprano and the alto, and compose a masterpiece that when we sit in the audience and hear the harmonies, it shows us what human beings can do when we are set on the staff of life to produce a harmonious creation. So I'm thankful for Beethoven. I'm thankful for the opportunity to live and to be able to play his music and bring his music to life in me, in my students, and in my artistic expression. I hope you enjoy our performances. Thank you.